Good afternoon. It's Sunday, October the 12th. I'm James Exum here in my home in South Austin, Texas. This video, which is part of all of my videos on YouTube, has the common theme of the philosophy of yoga. I'm an old yogi, and today I'll read from one of my books that I wrote a while back. The name of the book is Atman, the Soul of Yoga, and it's a pre-published edition. I did it a couple of years ago, and I've yet gotten around to publishing it. But there's a myriad of information inside this book, and I'm just getting a little, not tired, but a little bored is a better word, with constantly writing new discourses to put on my videos. So today I said, well, I've got a whole book here. It's got over 200 pages in it, about 250, I believe. And so I might as well read a little bit from my book. And this one, and also narrate on what I'm reading. This one is on page, let me see, this is on page 59 of the book, and it has to do with the Katha Upanishad, and you can look up the Katha Upanishad yourself if you like, and you'll see what I see. It's a wonderful book, a lot of very powerful information in this Upanishad. And so I'm reading from chapter 3, and I'm quoting. And these are different sutras, these are different verses. And I will start with verse 1. And I'm quoting, "Two there are who dwell within the body, in the intellect, the supreme akasa of the heart, enjoying the sure rewards of their own actions. The knowers of Brahman describe them as light and shade, as do those householders who are offered oblations in the 5 fires, and those who have thrice performed the Nachiketa sacrifice." Now that's pretty heavy yogic, Vedic writing and terminology. You really have to know the history of yoga, and you have to be familiar with who Nachiketa is, and he was visited by, or he went to visit Lord Yama, who is the Lord of Death, and that's a whole story within itself. So you can look that up on your own if you like. And then let's go to the second one. "We know how to perform the Nachiketa sacrifice, which is the bridge for sacrificers, and we also know that supreme imperishable Brahman, which is the creator, which is sought by those who wish to cross over the shore from where there is no fear." What a wonderful place to be in, to cross over onto a shore where there is no fear. John Wheeler wrote, he was an acquaintance of mine when he was out here at UT. He's the one with the black hole and all of that, and he also sat in the Einstein chair at Princeton. After he left Austin, went back to Princeton. He mentioned to me once, and this is one of his famous quotes, that we're like on an island of ignorance, and the more we develop our knowledge, the more the shore of the island grows out towards the sea, or towards the ocean. And that's something to be thought on also. Then this is where this is a very famous story, the story of the chariot comes in, and this is basically the main reason I'm reading this to you today, and sharing this knowledge with you from this Upanishad, the chariot. This is number 3. Know the Atman to be the master of the chariot. The body is the chariot, the intellect, the charioteer, and the mind, the reins. Well, the Atman is the soul. It is the Sakshi, which is my pen name when I write and when I do these videos. So know the Atman, the soul, to be the master of the chariot. See, most modern people think that the intellect is the master of the body, or the brain, which is just an organ. Your lungs are not the master of your air. Your tongue is not the master of your food. Your ears are not the master of all the things that you've absorbed from acoustical encounters. Your eyes are not the master of all of nature and the cosmos. They're just merely organs, as is the brain. So the complex works like this. You go from body to senses to brain to mind to intellect to soul. And that's the hierarchy of what's happening with human bodies and how they contend with their environments and all the input that comes through the senses to the human body, to the brain, to the mind, and they're absorbed up into the intellect, and then the intellect is overseen, of course, by the soul, and that's what's happening there. So know the Atman to be the master of the chariot, which is the body, and then the body is the chariot, the intellect is the charioteer. He's the guy sitting up in the driver's seat. And the mind is the reins. The reins deal with the horses, and the horses are the emotions, and the road they're on is the dharma, the path of life, which is modulated by the karma, which are the right and wrong and neutral actions that the horses perform, and so on and so forth. So you see this in these few words, in these few sutras. There's just a plethora of incredible knowledge condensed down within a few sentences. Yes, this is why the Katha is so important. And this is why, if you're new to all this, you need an old yogi, an old commentator, to translate a lot of this for you into modern English, so it'll be easier for you to adopt into your personal philosophy and absorb into your brain and mind for retention. So let's move on and go to number 5. If the buddhi, which is the intellect, being related to a mind that is always distracted and it's losing its discriminations, then the senses become uncontrolled, like vicious horses of a charioteer. And this is what I was talking about, the senses and the horses and the reins and all that. But if the buddhi, number 6, being related to a mind is always restrained, possesses discrimination, then the senses come under control, like the good horses of a charioteer. And this is again all from the Katha Upanishad. And I'm not really quite sure. It might be one of the 30. They call them, there's 30 important ones. And if it is, then it'll be a rather short Upanishad. Some of them are elongated and some of them are brief. And I believe this one might fall into brief too, and leaning towards the middle range. Number 7, if the buddhi, being related to a distracted mind, loses discrimination and therefore always remains impure, then the embodied soul, which is the jiva, never attains the goal, but enters into a round of births, which is samsara, and that soul that fails, if it fulfills the goal, attains the goal of moksha while alive, then becomes a jiva mukti. Mukti, possibly. I can't remember quite often. But one of those. You know, I'm an old man. Give me a break. Number 8. But if the buddhi, being related to a mind that is unrestrained, possesses discrimination, and therefore always remains pure, then the embodied soul attains the goal for which it is not born again, and that is moksha, liberation, not samsara. Samsara is the repetitive coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, or going and coming, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea of reincarnation. I'm a yogi. I'm a philosopher of yoga, and I do comparative philosophy and comparative mythologies of most of the major religions of the world. But when you get into reincarnation, then you're getting into the religion of the Hindu. I'm not a Hindu, obviously. But what I am is a practitioner of the science of yoga. Yoga is not a religion. Yoga is a science. So the next verse, number 9, a man who has discrimination for his charioteer, that's the intellect now, and holds the reins of the mind firmly, reaches the end of the road, and that is the supreme position of Vishnu. Now remember, there are 3 major gods in the Hindi. There's Brahman, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and the destroyer. So you've got 3 different ones there. So beyond the senses, this is 10 and 11. Beyond the senses are the objects. Beyond the objects is the mind. Beyond the mind, the intellect. Beyond the intellect, the great Atman. Beyond the great Atman, the unmanifest. Beyond the unmanifest, the Purusha. Beyond the Purusha, there is nothing. This is the end of the supreme goal. Okay? And the third god of destruction, of course, is Shiva. That self hidden in all beings does not shine forth, but it is seen by subtle seers through their one-pointed and subtle intellect. One-pointedness, when it's mentioned in yoga, in Vedic writings or yoga philosophy, one-pointedness means intense, concentrated meditation or observation. The wise man should merge his speech in his mind and his mind in his intellect. He should merge his intellect in the cosmic mind and the cosmic mind in the triangle self. Well, that's sort of a circular argument or a circular statement. And again, once you're into yoga, and once you've studied the philosophy of yoga for a number of years, I've been at it almost 50 years now, a little over 50 years actually. Started in 74 as a teacher of the asanas, which is the physical side. And after a few years, I drifted into the intellectual side, the philosophical side, and I've stayed there. And now number 14, arise, awake, approach the great, and learn. Like the sharp edge of a razor is that path, so the wise say. Hard to tread and difficult to cross. That's the path of the yogi, or the yoga student. The aspirant, the seeker, he's called, or she's called. Having realized Atman, which is the soul, which is soundless, intangible, formless, undecaying, and likewise tasteless, eternal, odorless, having realized that which is without beginning and end, beyond the great and unchanging one, is freed from the jaws of death. Well, how does a human become freed from the jaws of death, which is Yama, which is we started off with Yama and the young man that came to visit him, and that's the sacrifice we were talking about at the beginning. And that young man's name, I always forget his name. I don't know why. It's just one of those parts of my brain that doesn't want to accept it, I suppose. Nachiketa was his name. That's right. Okay, so let's roll back down to where we were. So, the great and unchanging one, once you realize the Atman. Now, in yoga, what does realize mean? Well, if you're in an algebra class, then it's algebra 1, and you've already gone through geometry, and now you're in algebra 1, or the way I was taught was algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, algebra 3, trig, but every school system has their own way of presenting and all of that. But let's not get into mathematics, let's stay with yoga, philosophy. So the wise man who has heard and related the eternal story of Nachiketa, told by death, is adored in the world of Brahman. So how are we freed from the jaws of death? See? Through realization. What is this realization we're talking about? Because once you realize that the Atman is eternal, was never born, will never die, and it came from Brahman, it's a spark on loan from Brahman to the human body. Well, it has to be beyond the jaws of death. Death cannot touch something that's eternal. Death cannot taint something which is pure. How can you kill something that was never born? And how can something that was never born die? This is how you escape the jaws of death, by coming to the realization of Atman and what he is and everything that's involved with his attributes, his character, his descriptive characterizations. There it is. So the wise man who has heard and related the eternal story of Nachiketa, told by death, is adored in the world of the Brahman. Well, of course he's adored. When you accept Brahman as the creator, then you've come home, so to speak. You're self-realized. You're back in the original state from which you came. Now number 17. And he who, practicing self-control, recites the supreme secret in an ensemble of Brahmins or at an after-death ceremony, obtains thereby infinite rewards. Yea, he obtains infinite rewards. Well, this is just, once you fall back into pure Brahma consciousness, then all the favors that are allowed to be bestowed on you, the grace of Brahman, the grace of proper Dharma, pathway through life, the grace of positive karma, of course these are gifts to be bestowed upon you. And that's the explanation of that in a nutshell. Well, here we are. So that's the end of that one. The next one in this chapter will be on the Mahabharata, which I've done that several times, but this will be a very brief and concise. And looking at it from a new vantage point, those other ones were okay, and they're still okay, but this will be a fresh breath of air for you as far as dealing with the Mahabharata. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, that's wonderful, that's great. And if you didn't, that's okay too. And as I said, I'm James Exum, I'm here in Austin, and I'm hoping you're enjoying these videos. This should be number 67 or 68. Boy, I'm just kicking along, right? I think I started back in July, so that's not bad since July for an old yogi to have written and created and edited, and I don't really edit much, presented, narrated, explained, commentated. That's a lot of work. But it's a lot of work if you look at it as work. This is how life works. If you look, no pun, but if you look at it as work, it is work. If you look at it as having fun, it's fun. Because we're all on the stage of the play of Lila, which is the play of God. And we're just here to amuse him and to amuse ourselves and to be good to each other. So be good to yourself, be good to each other, be good to strangers, and remember all the stuff that's happening in the world right now. It may seem depressing, and especially in the United States, but all this posturing by the politicians, and not all the politicians, you know the ones I'm talking about. But remember the old saying, this too shall pass. Well, thank you again for your time and coming. If you liked it, share it with your friends. If you didn't, that's okay, like I said, and I'll see you in the next video. Good day to you.